Before there was Zentangle, there was Hamonshu. Hi everyone, I'm Nat, and welcome to Ink and Hatch, a space dedicated to guiding y'all on your creative journeys. Remember, there are no mistakes, only opportunities to learn and grow. So today we're going to be filling our art hearts with inspiring patterns by Mori Yuzan from their 3-volume series, Hamonshu, a Japanese book of wave patterns and ripple designs. So throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing tips on how to integrate this beautiful resource as part of your drawing process and how a few extra strokes can make your pen drawings pop with drama. And we all love just a little bit of drama in our lives. So let's get started. First, I want to share a little background info. Hamonshu was published in 1903, and the best part about it is you can browse the entire series for free through the Internet Archive. I'll leave a link in the description down below. So given that there are 3 volumes in total with this book series, that means that there's a lot of different patterns to choose from. But I'm going to go and select 3 for us to do together that really popped for me. So right now I'm browsing through this book of Hamonshu. This is the first volume in the series, and I'm just going to be looking through this book to kind of gather inspiration, see what pops out at me, see what jumps out. And I'm really liking this design in particular, so I'm gonna make a note of that in my sketch book right now. I really like the negative space combined with these really nice and simple patterns right here. And another thing that's jumping out at me is how in this book there are these circles that kind of self-contain these patterns. So I think I'm going to take that and use that in our drawing today. So I'm going to keep flipping through this wonderful, beautiful book and see if I can find any more inspiration for what kind of pattern I want to do. Oh, these are gorgeous. We may or may not do those today, but you're more than welcome to flip through these volumes. And here it is again. Oh, these are gorgeous. And this one's really bursting out, showing how the waveform bursts out of its kind of contained space, which is definitely the attitude, I would say, of water. Hard to contain and gets everywhere, especially if you spill something. All right, so I think I have plenty of inspiration for how I want to use these patterns and maybe how I want to start breaking them down. So let's get started drawing and sketching out our patterns. Now that we have our piece of paper all set up, what we're going to be using is a pen and a pencil. I'll be using a Micron 01 pen today to get those really nice fine lines. The 01 indicates the kind of size of the nib. So as you can see, it's super duper thin, whereas with a Micron 08 pen right here, the nib is a little bit chunkier, a little fatter. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, I really like the circles that were containing the waveforms, and maybe some of them where they were bursting out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a coffee cup that I have that usually contains all of my brushes, but today I'm going to be using it as a little pattern maker or a little border maker. So I'm going to place my my cup on my paper and use that to create a really nice circle. Right like that. And I think I'm going to do that thing where we kind of have these overlapping circles. And I'm going to be using a smaller cup, I think, one that has my scissors in it as an adjoining pattern. But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it seem like this is kind of behind the bigger one, kind of create a sense of overlapping and kind of massiveness in size. And then over here, where do I want to place it? I think over here, I'm going to place the last one. Yeah, why not? And I'm going to do it also in a rather big size. And this is all in pencil. All right, now we have our nice layout, and I'm going to adjust right here. Make sure y'all can see. Awesome. Now we are ready to get started. Now that we have kind of our borders and our spaces, we can start to imagine what exactly and where exactly we're going to put everything. So for our first pattern, I think I'm going to start out with one that I saw with the arching lines. And so I am going to start over here, and I'm going to draw just a little sketch to kind of help me plan out how everything's going to look. So I'm going to zoom in my camera here to make sure we can focus up right here. And so what I'm going to do is I really liked the ones with the arches and kind of the negative space from kind of like that foamy water. So I am going to start kind of sketching out like the kind of ripply arcing water that's kind of like coming up, all this sea foam and the small ripples. I want to make sure that we vary our ripple lines to make sure we have that effect of different sizes. Our brains love when we vary sizes and angles. All right, so I have a nice outline of what I've done with my sketch. And now I'm going to come in with my pen here and start to draw over some of these lines. Now I don't need to draw over all of them. If I find I'd like to go a little bit higher up with one of my lines, the great thing about pencil marks is they're guidelines. You know, it's kind of like a pirate code. It's all just more like guidelines than actual rules. Pencils allow us to kind of imagine where we could go with a drawing. And they act kind of as our wayfinders, as our guide. And I'm not drawing in every single line, just so that I can make sure that I'm getting a nice balance of arcing and under, these kind of like under and over U-shaped lines that I'm creating. Some variation of straights and arcs and S-curves as I'm drawing. You want to make sure you vary your lines, because it's the same idea, you know, making sure that you have big arcs and small arcs and straights. You know, when everything's uniform, when everything's exactly the same, our brains are kind of like, it's kind of monotonous. It's like looking at how when you're sometimes on a road trip and you're stuck kind of in the plains, the Great Plains, and it's just all flat and highway, and you know, it's not very fun. It's not very entertaining to look at. But when you see those open mountain ranges and all those arcs and tree lines, it's very engaging for our minds. And so we're going to kind of create the same idea with our waveforms. All right, so we have the general gesture of our wave right here, which is great. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting in those arcs, those arcing lines. And so I'm going to start, I think, over here in the corner. This seems like a safe spot to get started. I'm going to start out with kind of creating almost like a rainbow, but without the color. And then I'm going to try my best to draw behind, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Create about the same amount of arcs. So I'm just going to be going through here and creating arcs in these spaces, making sure that I draw behind this big waveform in the foreground. And I'm gonna have to like play around a little bit. I'm going to have to kind of figure out where the line might be going. I'm gonna have to do a lot of best guesswork with my drawing, and that's okay. That's okay. So I'm going to speed this up for y'all as I'm filling everything in. And make sure throughout this process, your shoulders are relaxed and you're not death gripping your pen as you're drawing. Sometimes it's good to check in with our bodies, check in with ourselves, check in with our comfort level. We're not supposed to be tense. And I constantly have to remind myself to relax my shoulders. This isn't supposed to be stressful, but sometimes those shoulders start to arc up towards our ears. So bring them back down. It's okay. And also, I want to make a note that my arcs, like I'm already diverging a little bit from Hamonshu because I want my arcs to look like this. So I'm just using Hamonshu as just a reference and kind of playing when I want to play. If I feel like I want to zig where he zags, where they zag, then I will do that. You do not have to copy, though tracing is totally valid to kind of get to learn how to do something. And now I've finished filling in this area with arcs, and now we're going to go in and do a little bit of detail work. So what I'm going to be doing right now, everything looks really flat, which is fine. That is a perfectly valid look. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to just add a little bit of pop, a little bit of drama by redrawing over some of these lines. So just creating little arcs, little bows in certain spaces. Let me zoom in here so y'all can really get a good look at what I'm trying to illustrate here. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of redrawing over various lines. And maybe I'll draw a little bit wider line and then come back in to that line like that. And to create just a little bit more sense of drama and contrast with my lines. And the lack of line also does that. It almost creates a little bit of a shimmer effect. So I'm using my lack of line in a way, and certain pieces of my line to redraw. And you'll even notice like there's a few pieces where my arcs kind of, I was a little bit overzealous when I was drawing them. So what I can do is I can just thicken that line just a little bit, and oh, look at that. You can't even tell that I made a little mistake there. So redrawing over lines can also help you cover up. use that as an opportunity to refine your drawing, if you will. So right now I'm just going in, I'm taking a moment to kind of look at kind of where my arcs and where my lines are, and taking a moment, sitting back in my chair, looking at the piece, how it feels to me, where I want to add just a little bit more weight to my lines. And then I'm coming back in and adding that weight. But I'm constantly stepping back from my drawing, checking in with myself, seeing what I feel looks good, what's working, and then coming back in, making sure that you get that distance from your piece and not constantly being up very, very up close to it is really good to make sure that you really see the entirety, the entire ecosystem that you're building here. Because everything relates to everything else. Like I said, it's an ecosystem. Your drawing isn't just, you know, one little thing here and there. It all kind of comes together into this beautiful thing. And every line is kind of interacting and playing off of other lines. And so we want to make sure that we have a healthy doodling ecosystem, and check in to see and make sure that we're not adding too much, we're not trimming back too much, adding that line variation, seeing what looks good, because right now what we're doing is we're just doodling. And we're checking in with our art heart, our little art hearts. And your art heart, as the more you draw and the more you doodle, the more you'll find out and have that vocabulary to describe, you know, why something is or isn't working. Right now you might be like, well, I know something isn't working. I'm not quite sure why, but I know it's not working and I need to fix something. And the more you draw, the more you'll be able to articulate those feelings. All right, yeah, this looks good. I will consider this done. And so now I'm going to kind of meander over here to my little wee baby circle, my little teeny boy. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a relatively simple waveform. It's one that we saw as we were kind of skirting past and browsing through Hamonshu. And this one looks really simple, but looks like it could be a lot of fun to noodle around and play with. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our pen. And we're going to create almost like arcing waves. All right. That's looking good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add that contrast again. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to redraw over some of these lines to give them more volume, because right now they just kind of look like lines, just, you know, overlapping lines. Right now we're going to add some depth and dimension to them. So I'm redrawing over this line, and then at the end here I'm just going to taper that line and follow kind of the arc that I made with my pencil and color that in. Make sure I taper that line off just a little bit more, and I'm feathering the line a little bit, so I'm kind of touching the page and then I'm lifting off with my pen to kind of create a very light feather. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And I'm going to dash that line, feather that line just a little bit right there. Oh, that looks good. I like that. And under here, rather than kind of creating this kind of a little bit hard triangle line, I'm going to, off of here, kind of create an S curve to give it a little bit more of that flowy water shape. I'll color in this edge. It's almost as if like the water's pooling over at these little edges. When it's meeting here, I'll create just a little C curve line, a little dip. Oh, we have quite a nice dynamic drawing coming along. Now I want to add some extra accents. I think I'm going to add some kind of like bubbling frothiness. Creating little arcs to symbolize like little bubbles. So I just created a few overlapping arcs, and they made a little bit of like adjustments to the line thickness in certain areas. And I saw another one that looked really cute. Like these little frothy bubbles were crisscrossing, but then it's almost like they created a little curly Q. With their line, which I thought was just the most wonderful thing. And sometimes they would add a little kind of dot, little note at the end, and just round out some of those, add a little bit of thickness to the lines there. So that's just yet another simple doodle thanks to Hamonshu. All right, now we're on to our very last circle. We're going to start by using our pencil to kind of help us wayfind a little bit. And there's going to be a bit of negative space that we're going to use. Same thing as over here, where the wave, the frothy white wave, is kind of sitting in the foreground. And I'm going to start off at the bottom and really kind of follow that idea of a wave, using my hand and just kind of going randomly. And then when I come up to the arcing crest of that wave, I'm just going to kind of create a little curly Q and then go from kind of thin to thick. Let it bow out just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create this cresting wave coming back. And then different states of these waves arcing. Make sure to create some of that variation I was talking about in big and small lines and curves. Make sure to, if you're feeling like you're getting a little too repetitive, make sure to pick up your pencil, take a moment, and then come back to your wave. Because sometimes we can get into that rut of constantly going back and forth with our lines. Awesome. All right, so we have quite a nice little random waveform, kind of cresting and arcing. And we're going to do the same thing as before, where we're going to redraw over these lines, and you don't have to do everything perfectly. As you can see, I'm kind of using it as a guideline. Our pencils allow us to do little do-overs, you know. All right, now we have quite a lovely waveform going on here, and this is going to be white, and then in the background we're going to create a roiling sea. So I'm gonna start in the middle here, on the top middle-ish, with just a simple spiral, and occasionally I'll skip my lines just to create a little extra dynamism. And I'm going to vary kind of the thickness and closeness of some of these lines to give it a kind of a random feeling, as if each line is kind of going another ripple in the water. Right. And now I'm going to create some like more wavy waveforms, if you will. So I'm just going to have these going behind. Some of them will be crashing into one another. Some of them will cascade out. The important thing is that you play with these lines. Take that moment to step back, and then come back in and keep working those lines. All right, we have quite the roiling sea going on here. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of extra by adding that extra line weight to these lines, creating that sense of dark and light, that push and that pull with our waveforms. That looks really good. Awesome. Let's pull back, and we've created quite a lovely kind of collage of all these different waveforms, and we've created nice bite-sized patterns for us to do. And as we kind of take a step back, make sure to take that moment to sign your work. Alright guys, that's all I have for you for this little doodle interlude. I hope that you feel inspired by Hamonshu and the wonderful wave pattern drawings that we did together today. Please be sure to tag me at Ink and Hatch if you're on Instagram. I'd love to see the drawings that you create, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. And if you want more videos like this, if you have more art questions, if you're stuck and you have this burning question that you need help with, please be sure to drop a question in the comment down below. I'm happy to help anyone on their art and creative journey. So until next time guys, bye.